Okay, so apologies for the delay. I've been extremely busy with lots of Zoes, really. But an update on the legal case. So quite a few things have happened, and it's taken some interesting turns. Firstly, if you're not subscribed, please do so you can catch up on other updates in this case. I'm inside the car, by the way, just because it's pretty windy outside, so there'll be a lot of background noise. So if you're not familiar with what's happening in this case, quick recap. So basically, this is a Renault Zoe. It's subject to a battery lease. It's done a few miles. It's actually got a couple of faults. One of them's probably a motor fault. There's another related fault. It needs quite a lot of time spending on it. But the car is not in a great condition. It's quite tatty, got sort of scratched. It's not great on the outside. Common issue with the seats, other than they need a clean, but the seats they sort of break on the sides and stuff. It just needs a lot of time and money spending on it, and I don't think it's worth it. So I want to scrap this car, but it's got a battery lease. So this is where you pay monthly to lease the battery, and the car's cheaper. So I wanted to give the battery back. I had a lot of difficulty in doing so, couldn't even get a quote from it. They said you need to go through a dealer. The dealer just didn't know what on earth I was talking about. Said they were a ZE dealership, turns out they're actually not. And Renault quoted me a buyout price of over £2,000. So, effectively, I was being held to ransom in a contract that I wanted to get out of and couldn't. So I raised court action, small claims court action, with Renault and against Mobilise Finance, who are these are the finance, like Renault Finance company, effectively Renault Finance. And what happened was, it appeared they didn't reply, and I got a default judgment. So I got a CCJ basically to the defendant. So that's Mobilise, Renault Finance. So I raised a claim for the 2053 because that was the buyout price on the battery, on the basis that when I get that money, I can just pay it back to them to end the lease. So I own the battery, because it didn't seem possible to even arrange for the battery to be removed. Okay. So we got this. Then I started getting emails from their solicitor saying, "Oh no, we did reply. You should agree to have this CCJ cancelled." And I was kind of like, well, are they just trying to say this to get me to cancel it? It's hard to know. Subsequently to this, so this is what I showed in the last video, I have received another letter. So this is from the court, and basically, a Renault solicitor applied to the court and said that they did reply, but that it obviously just hadn't been considered in time, and have got the court to cancel the CCJ. Okay, so the court have agreed basically that they did reply in time, and they've concluded. The judgment was entered. So the court decision, when the defendant, Renault Finance, had filed an application. Okay, so they had replied, but then the court made a judgment not considering their application because they hadn't processed it or whatever. It was sitting in the in tray, and the judgment is what they therefore call irregular. So effectively, my CCJ has been cancelled, so that's knocked off. So as it stands now, effectively, we would go to court. So I've had a little bit of back and forth with Renault's solicitor. It's getting a little bit difficult because they basically twist everything. They're experts, obviously. They know this process a lot better than I do. And so they twist everything around. So, they say, that this action's frivolous and that I should be paying their costs if I lose. And I say to them, well, I've said to them repeatedly, let's just make an agreement to end it. If you give me a cheap buyout price, then I'll just pay it and then the whole thing's ended. But basically, whatever you say, they just twist it around. So the latest basically is that I have said to them that I'm happy to go to court. There obviously there's going to be costs involved with this. So we can go to court. I've also said to them that the way the battery lease was started was not correct. So on this car, when I applied to have the battery lease into my name, you have to fill out an application form. Then they do a credit check on you and you get the full agreement. And then you send that back. And then at that point, the agreement is transferred into your name, you sign the documents, the full application form, the full lease documents, and you provide a copy of your driving licence to show your signature. At that point, when I tried to get the lease on this car, they came back and said, we can't start the agreement because the signature doesn't match your driving licence. So my driving licence at that point was like 10 years old, due for renewal, and that signature was just 10 years ago, and I don't sign it like that anymore. I can't do that signature anymore. It's just changed over time. So probably as have my hands from lots of jobs. So they said they couldn't start it. So basically I said to the buyer, well, I can't buy this car because they won't start the lease. Subsequently, they then just put it into my name and then said, oh, it started. And I was like, okay. So that's pretty odd. The other thing I've said to them is that this agreement doesn't seem to conform to consumer protection law, because inside consumer protection law there are various rules around financial contracts, and this is a lease, this is a financial lease, so things like fees and charges should be laid out. But, they're allowing you to buy out the battery, they're allowing you to return it at certain costs, but in the contract, none of that's laid out. It just says you can return it. But it doesn't, it doesn't specify this kind of thing. So I don't think it meets consumer protection law. So we could go to court and argue these things. So to do that, because in the original claim, basically, I only put about that I was being held into the contract and I couldn't return the battery. But to add those extra aspects, I would need to update my claim, which I need legal representation to do. Now, to add into the mix, the buyout price has reduced. So I raised a claim, because they quoted me to buy it out, this is in about February this year, of that 2,053. To buy out the battery is now about £1,000. So it's literally dropped by half. Actually, I was chatting to someone a few days ago with a similar age car, and they said that they got a buyout price of like 600 quid or something. I'm sure they seem to make this up as they go along. But, realistically, we are possibly risking a lot more than 1,000 in costs, or certainly a lot more than the 600 to prove the point. But then, should we do this to get these leases tested in court? To get a judge to look at the lease text and say whether it's fair and reasonable that they should try and charge you pretty basically about £1,500 if you want to give the battery back. When that's not specified in the lease, and that seems completely unreasonable. So really we've got two options at this point. We can effectively try and get a cheap buyout, or negotiate, or accept the £1,000 buyout and then just end it. They would probably try to put the costs on me for the solicitor and the court, whatever court costs up to this point. So that's option one. Option two is that we get proper legal representation and basically get all of the aspects, so update the legal case to include everything that might be wrong with the lease, so the fees and charges, the way this lease was started. But really the bits I'm interested in are the bits that apply to everyone, because the whole idea of this was to try and get a better path for anyone with a battery lease, so that we can get things changed to make it easier for everyone, really. It's not just about this car. So even if I get a cheap buyout, that doesn't really work because you might not. The whole idea is that we want the lease to be tested to try and get something to change, so we can get a legal ruling, which means that they can't just charge ridiculous amounts to try and get out of this lease, because people are genuinely being held in an expensive situation you can't get out of. Try and charge £1,500 to give a battery back, and they're shipping it back to France. I don't care if it's going back to France. It says in the contract you could get charged removal and restocking fees, but no one would ever imagine that that's £1,500. That's very excessive. So what I would rather do is option two, get proper representation, get the lease properly tested in court, and see what happens from that point. Problem is, there is a significant cost to that, and that just makes things kind of difficult. I do get ad revenue from these videos, but it's not vast amounts, basically. Unless you get like hundreds of thousands of views, you're not making a fortune from YouTube, realistically. What do you think we should do? Potentially there's a case, I guess, that if we were going to put this to court and get proper representation, maybe we could do like a bit of crowdfunding just to get, if everyone could chip in a couple of quid, then we can get these properly tested, and that might benefit everyone. That's an option. So what do you think we should do next? Things have changed. They've had it cancelled effectively. So at this point it would go to court. I've had a bit of back and forth, but yeah, it's really getting to the point where they twist every word, and you need someone with the experience, need a solicitor basically, to be able to negotiate with them properly. Yeah, and as I say, it's not just about this car. It is about getting a judgment in place so that we make it easier for anyone to get out of their battery lease. So let me know what you think. We need to make a decision reasonably quickly, let's say within the next week or two. Decide what we're going to do. If we're going to do some crowdfunding or something, we need to get that up and running. Obviously, I would much prefer to go to court and get this properly tested and fight it and get some representation. It's a lot of hassle as well when I'm dealing with cars and customers and things, to then be dealing with solicitors things, get your head around that. So it's sort of it's got to the point where it's a little bit more than I can deal with. The solicitor coming back now, especially having to be careful with your words and all that kind of stuff. And like I say, anything you say, they just twist it basically. So let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to find out what happens next, and we will make our decision and move forward. But yeah, I really want this to be a test case rather than just me getting out of this one cheaply. That just only helps this one car. Doesn't help the thousands of people out there who've also got these leases, and these cars are getting older. They're going to have issues, and it's just a ridiculous cost to get out of it. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will catch you later. Cheers.